Hey everybody, more come follow me. We're in John chapters 2 through 4, so 2, 3 and 4. And this is John's events that you'll find here, and the things that John writes about you're not going to find in the other three Gospels. Again, why it's important to have more than one witness, right? But let's just for a little time go back to the timeline we discussed last week in insight number 1. So the events from this week's reading happen all around the time of the past 2 weeks study. So everything that we've had from this week and the past 2 weeks, all sort of in the same few months. Perhaps in chapter 4 after Jesus was baptized and fasted in the wilderness. So maybe 2 and 3 before, maybe 4 after, and it's not entirely clear. But if you remember that, we did this. So we know that he meets some of the disciples and he gets baptized. As you can see, I've used high quality, reusing old primary resources. Fast in the wilderness, have a look at that. And then, he knows that John's in prison, and John the Baptist. And what's interesting in this week's reading is we read that, as Jesus goes about, preaches, and he's baptizing, but his disciples are baptizing as well. And John's not yet in prison, so that's in chapter 3, I think, but by the time 4 comes, John the Baptist isn't mentioned. So it's likely that this fasting in the wilderness happened somewhere in between there. We don't know exactly when. It's all about the same time. And then I put up all these events. There's some events. So these are the ones we're going to see this week. So there's water to wine. He ejects the money changes at the temple. I'm not going to talk about that one, but it's pretty straightforward there. He meets Nicodemus, which I've actually made a 2-parter because that's really awesome. And then he teaches and baptizes in Judea. So this is in John as well, and this is still when John the Baptist is not yet in prison. And then you get John the Baptist gets imprisoned, and you find that out in Luke. So these sort of all happen around the same time, and then you also get this week too. This is in John 4. This is something I think. This is what I can figure anyway. If you've got other opinions, let me know. And then you've got Jesus teaches the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. He heals the son of a nobleman, and he heals a man with an unclean spirit. Now, we're going to talk about this one, but these are also in this week, and I'm not talking about those either. Actually, one of them's a marked one with unclean spirit, and I think we talked about that last week. So, they all kind of match in, but this is where I took all that from. Now this you can find if you go to the church website and you look up library and then go church magazines and you want Ensign or Leo Honor as it might be called now. And this is found in the 2003 series, and you want, as you can see I've written here, January, April and July. And they cover Christ's birth right up until his death and after his death and the mission of Paul, and it's all laid out there with little maps and everything. It's pretty cool. You were at the time able to buy it from distribution. Probably not anymore. Ours certainly doesn't have any, but you can print it from that resource there. And that's a timeline that I use. So if you have a look at these events that we're talking about and where we are, they're all numbered. If you can see here, it just says spring, and they're sort of all scattered in there. So, and this is him calling his disciples off the boat. So by this point, John the Baptist is in prison. But yeah, it's interesting that we don't actually know, they're sort of in here, but you don't know exactly how it all unfolded. And one day we're going to have a movie of exactly how it unfolded. We'll be able to see it in real life and figure it out. But in the meantime, there's still really good lessons to take from all of this. And don't stress too much if you don't know exactly the timeline. Just know the message, really, from what's been written down. Why was this written? What was important about it? What do we need to learn from it? That's what we always take from the scriptures. Because from the scriptures, as awesome as they are, we get this much insight, sometimes even less, of a huge picture. And we have to take a lot of things into account when we read those things in that time and figure that out. So let's get into it. So this is John 2, verses 1 to 11. So this is Jesus turning water into wine in Cana. So they go there to wedding. This is in Galilee, so this is like a no-name podunk little town on the edge of a nowhere. And they run out of wine. This is how it goes. And his mother is like, oh my gosh, they're out of wine. That's like the unthinkable thing at the time of the wedding. Like you just can't do that. It's like really bad manners. It's going to offend a lot of people. It could cause a whole lot of issues. Like, it's like socially, it was a really bad thing to have happen at the wedding. It showed lack of preparation and lack of planning and whatever had gone on, right? So Mary, of course, going, I know who can fix this, goes to Jesus and says, they've run out of wine. Now, in verse 4, it says, Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. And you're like, well, that sounds quite a rude way to talk to his mother. But what he's saying is, what do you need me to do? I'll do it. Just what do you want me to do? Like, I'm not just going to present you with wine. Like he says to, when he says to people, they said to Noah, build a boat, and Nephi, build a boat, and like they actually had to do something to like get that. You don't just turn up and say, "Where's my miracle?" Come on. And his mum knew this, so she, knowing this, turned around to the servants who were there and said to them, "You guys do whatever he tells you to do," and left it at that. I'm like, now there's a good mother right there. First of all, goes to her son knowing that her son can help, and then trusting completely in her son that absolutely, I know him. Not only is he the Savior, but I have raised him well. He is a well-behaved, good man. Whether he was the Savior or not, he was always going to be a fantastic guy because of his parents, right? So, yeah, then there's it says 6 water pots of stone. This is in verse 6. After the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Now, apparently a firkin is 20 to 30 gallons, and I'd still have to look up what gallons is. But it's a lot. Like, way more than what you would have needed. And they were like jars set at the back of the house, kind of like in the, the room where you come in all muddy and clean off. So it wasn't drinking water. It was, it wasn't all muddied up yet, but it was there sort of from the, the well with all the mosquito larvae in it, probably, I don't know. And like it was there for washing rather than drinking or cooking with. And Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them to the brim, and then they go out and drink wine. And the governor that was there said, this is the best wine. Usually they give that first, and this is last, this is amazing, this is awesome. And then verse 11 it says, this beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. So this is like the first sort of public miracle. So I've entitled this The Beginning of Miracles Publicly, because obviously he's done miracles before. We don't know what they were or what they look like exactly. But you can assume that he would have. Mary knew he could. So, yeah. So, Cana, Galilee. Perhaps even a family wedding. Perhaps this was a family wedding. Let's just say it wasn't, right? In this small, out-of-the-way town, and the unthinkable embarrassment, they run out of wine. It'd be like running out of food at a wedding these days. It'd be like very embarrassing. That would be all they talk about, right? You go to a wedding, oh, they ran out of beef. Oh my gosh. It's just unthinkable. And it, culturally then, really bad manners. So Mary asked Jesus to help, knowing he will solve the issue. He says, woman, what have I to do with thee? Meaning, what would you like me to do, Mum? What's up? Mary tells the servants to do whatever he says. And there's a lesson to learn in that if you're going to respect Mary for being who she is and know her character, if she said to you, do whatever Jesus says, would you do that? Think about that. There's a little lesson in there too. And then taking the vessels, or firkins, of however that's their measuring, of water from the back entrance, or they put the water in there, water fit for washing stuff or cleaning but not drinking, Jesus turns it into the best wine. So, how do you see him taking everyday items and creating miracles in your life? Because often when these miracles come, they're not weird and wonderful things that suddenly turn up. They're usually the everyday things that are around you. Sometimes it's some interesting things from out there, but mostly it's the stuff that already exists and the people that are already in your life or going to enter your life anyway. And there's miracles in that, which is often why we miss them. So how do you see him taking everyday items and turning them into miracles in your life? I mean, even to me, like now I'm of the generation where I can see, I know what my grandparents had and what the youth have now, and I can see the both technical world of devices and brilliant things like that. But then I also, grew up in my grandparents' world, where there was no devices and the phone was attached to the wall and every call cost, and it was just interesting differences. And I think, if I took the cell phone I'm recording on right now and told my grandfather that's how I was doing it, he would think that was an absolute miracle, because to him it is, and it's an everyday item to us, and yet it is a miracle. So you think about it a little more deeply and appreciate, because we do take for granted this technology, and that this is a miracle. A camera and a phone that I can upload to something called an internet that anyone can watch. How is that an awesome way to spread the gospel? I mean, it spreads a lot of lies and a lot of other stuff too, but it's a great way to spread good things as well. But that's a miracle just from an everyday thing. And I've got like some lighting, but I don't have like all the fancy equipment, and it's just me and my scriptures and my notebook, that's it. And yet even being able to do this is a miracle. So, how do you see him? You might not be taking, gallons of non-drinking water and turning them into lemonade or Dr. Pepper or whatever you want to drink. But what is he doing with everyday things in your life and making them into miracles? Creating the miracles there. Are you seeing that? Are you looking? Because we're going to talk about that a little bit more, about are we missing them? So have a think of that. So Sister Michelle Craig, she's on the Young Women's Presidency currently. Amazing woman. Very awesome. She said, Jesus' miracles often begin with a recognition of want, need, failure, and inadequacy. So his miracles will often come from a desire, a want, need, something that we're lacking, something that we're in need of, and the answer is the miracle, or the comfort is the miracle. So, are we missing them, or are we really looking? Because they'll seem every day to us, and yet it's a miracle. So have a think on that. So that was the beginning of his miracles publicly. Probably did quite a few before that, but that's the beginning of it publicly. So yeah, right. So let's go over and look at John chapter 3, because this is Nicodemus, and there's some really great lessons to learn here. I'll see you there.